Well, yeah, and also I would just say that like it feels very like you can tell that you're watching something that's like very overly constructed. They were like it's
Yeah,
suicide as a device, which to
right.
be fair is something that Ari Aster kind of does too. But the thing that's
Yeah.
so amazing I find about his like constructed piece is that like it is very expertly constructed in a way that like he draws your attention to it, but in a way that like invites you to kind of like watch the construction. So then you get this weird thing, almost like I do when I watch a Coen Brothers film, where it's a little bit mean. It's a little bit like picking the wings off flies a little bit. Kind
Yeah.
of like the characters exist in this little thing that you're sitting in a little globe like watching them.
But they still feel like fleshed out
but like
characters.
it's horror and with this you kind of get the idea that they want to hit you with the twist so bad that they don't tell you that that's the kind of film you're watching for like a long time. And
Yeah,
then they tell
a
you that that's
long
the kind
time.
of film you're watching and it's so cheap and so stupid.
It's so stupid. That's the like. Okay, so the dad has a new girlfriend, and also let's speak on this. The girlfriend was in a suicide cult when she was 12, and apparently
Yes.
the dad like did a book on the suicide cults or something, or studied it, or something along those lines. Am I right there?
Yeah, he wrote a book about her particular suicide cult that she was in, and she was the lone survivor of that cult.
So how
And
old
he was
was
studying
she?
her? He was studying her as a research object, and then he decided to make her his girlfriend, which is then what triggers the mom to commit suicide.
Okay, so and this is another kind of problem I have. It's like everybody in this movie is stupid. Like everybody is. It's just either they're cruel, they're dumb, or it just doesn't make any sense in my opinion. So you have the dad who's
some
dating
combination.
like this cult survivalist, and she was 12 when this all happened. So I'm like, how old was she when he was studying this? And it just, I don't know. The timeline is very questionable.
Definitely weird vibes.
Yeah, weird vibes from the dad in that regard.
Creepy dad.
And then he makes the genius decision to leave his two kids who do not like the new girlfriend and are very upset because their mother just shot herself in the head. And he's like, why don't we just leave them in this like cabin in the middle of nowhere in the dead of cold winter where you could die within 30 minutes, and we're gonna give this girl who survived in a cult that where they all shot themselves, we're gonna give her a handgun. Real fucking smart. It's just so stupid. Like the
Yeah, 'cause-
setup,
'cause
you see it right away. You're like, okay, I wonder what's gonna happen now that she has a handgun. Like it.
Well,
just,
yeah, and also
Ugh.
just the idea of like taking the kids to like a winter holiday vacation scenario and being like, I'm gonna bring a new girlfriend and you guys are all gonna bond, even though clearly the
You have
kids
no interest
don't
in
like
it.
her because she caused their mom's suicide.
right.
And so you spend the whole movie being like, there's something kind of creepy going on here, but you're not really sure what the horror is supposed to be. Like, just I guess something's going to go bad at some point.
Right.
That's like the idea, and it does the Ari Aster thing where it's like straight up stealing some of like the symmetrical shots.
The miniature
honestly,
thing?
The
Like, that was
miniature thing
insane.
was when it hit for me when I was like, oh, come on.
Well, here's the thing. It's like, I don't mind if a filmmaker, 20... I'm not saying you can't use a miniature house or miniatures as like a metaphor for something ever again because Hereditary did it. But maybe don't do it 2 years later, and don't do it exactly as it's filmed in Hereditary. Like it's such a blatant copy. I was like, what the? Okay, you better make this good because that's just ripped from Hereditary.
It was like the symmetrical framing, the slow dollies, the vague sort of like droning soundtrack, and then the story being about like familial fallout due to grief and trauma. I was like, this is like straight up, this is just the exact playbook of like the current A24 model of horror.
Yeah.
Which even Ari Aster like subverted with his own second follow-up feature. Like even he's not making that kind of movie the same way anymore. He did a full daytime like pagan cult one, right? So it's like very different. And then but then they go into the attic, and I was like, it's the same thing, the miniature house. I was like, oh my god, this is so unbelievably stylistically derivative.
Yeah.
And also I couldn't figure out exactly why it was doing this tone, because like by this point in Hereditary, like there's so much strange things happening, and it's layering on like sort of like the history with the grandma. It's laying on some of the cult aspects. Obviously you get the decapitation in the middle of the film, which sort of sends everything spiraling psychologically.
Yeah. And I get the sense that the family's still trying, whereas I feel like with this, the lodge, it's just like we're set in with them when all the shit has already happened, and I feel confused as to why everything is so miserable. I know the suicide is obviously a big thing. It's just they don't set any of that up really. So I don't feel justified in all its misery, you know?
Well, then also we have to get to, which is that they start trying to develop some of the more horror elements.
Right.
Which they play to you quite seriously, is this idea that like perhaps after they've gotten snowed in, cabin fever maybe starts to set. They literally play a clip from The Thing, which is not a great movie to reference.
Old choice.
And so they set in sort of like this, this sort of apocalyptic implied scenario where like maybe they've all died. Maybe she killed them already in a little bit of a suicide cult thing that she doesn't even know, because she, her meds are missing, and
Right.
maybe she's starting to go a little bit off the rails, and it turns into that little bit like, is there a supernatural thing happening here, or is she crazy? It's that exact same dynamic once again.